that for the air conditioning?
No,
We're going to go live in
it's
just a
closed
minute.
because it's been traditionally closed. Not necessarily a popular question with me.
All right, we're starting. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Streets and Transportation Committee meeting of the City of Rehoboth Beach. It is Thursday, December 15th, and I call this meeting to order at 2 p.m. I'm going to do a roll call, please. Mr. David Diefendorf.
Here.
David Mann.
Here,
Donna Mabry.
Here.
John Geiger.
Here?
Elise Moore is absent at this time. Chris Galanti will not be with us today. He had a work conflict, and the chair is here. We have a quorum and can conduct business. Approval of minutes. We had a meeting. Our last meeting was held on October 20th. Those minutes were emailed out. Does anyone have any corrections, changes, questions? Then I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
so moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by David Mann and a second by Donna Mabry to approve the meeting minutes of October 20th, 2022. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And those meeting minutes are approved. We have one piece of correspondence from Mr. John Cantez, and we will talk about that later when that agenda item comes up. For the record, Elise Moore has joined us.
Sorry.
I'd like to give you a couple updates regarding the Munson Street recommendations. The speed limit signage was installed, I think it was 2 weeks ago. We are planning on, the city manager has planned that the double yellow lines will be painted in January. And by March, the driveway boxes will be painted. And he's in the midst of getting bids for the radar speed signs. So
Before radar?
the driveway blocks. So those recommendations are moving quickly and are in. All of the recommendations are on the queue to be done by the beginning of, the spring season. Any questions regarding those recommendations on Munson?
That's really fast, it's great.
Yeah, I'm very happy that we're able to move quickly on that. Next, I may turn it over to Elise and David, who helped put together this recommendation for a comprehensive traffic parking study. I would throw pedestrian safety in there too, as we cover that as well. Up on the screen, we have the recommendation.
Do you all
that
have copies? I have copies
Yeah,
here.
and we've got
Awesome,
copies. Yeah,
thank you.
thank you, Elise.
Hello.
Thanks.
I'm so sorry.
They were attached.
So this is the second time that we've talked about it quite a bit. This is the second time that we've got it in writing in front of us. This is a bit more robust than what we had before, so I'm happy to see that. Would you, David or Elise, do you want to just very briefly go through and talk about sort of the background and some of the recommendations?
Most of the recommendations were how we were presenting it outline-wise. And we got it on one page to make it easier to understand and breaking it down into categories. Can you think of anything else in particular? That was sort of the,
That's why we did it, just to make it easier for the commissioners to understand what the background, the recommendations, and the outcome would be. I think it reads pretty well. I'm not sure anybody else has any other comments or other things we want to add to it. But we try to have a comprehensive list.
and the other, Dave, too. Dave helped, too.
Right.
Well, I think there's just one thing missing. It's very excellent work. and that's handicapped. We have to keep that in front of us all the time,
Oh, that's good.
that we need adequate handicap parking in the city.
Absolutely.
I can tell you what I used to do when my wife was in a wheelchair. I parked in the handicap part up on the boardwalk. There were two places. And then I would tour the whole city from there. I mean, it was a good ride to do that, but that's what we did. This committee has had a man here from the Veterans Association who he was handicapped himself in a wheelchair. And he said that we had met the minimums. So we're okay minimum-wise, but there's more and more people in wheelchairs and scooters and things like that. And so we have to always keep that in mind.
Great comment, thank you.
I will add that. What do you think to the comprehensive analysis of items?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Right. Would I say handicap access? Do you think that's the best way of putting it, or?
I prefer access to parking, but, because it encompasses more.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
One thing that we use throughout the city, at least in a few spots that we don't have here, and that's the use of speed bumps. So we want to include that as something that they look at.
Okay.
I thought we had that in there somewhere.
Thought we did too.
It seems like that would be a solution, that leave it up to them whether to recommend speed bumps.
Otherwise,
I think we've been trying
it
to
looks
avoid
good.
speed bumps.
Yeah, speed bumps, speed humps. Keith is not here, but I'd kind of like to understand his position on those also, because I think it's been something we've tried to avoid. Yes. So Kevin, maybe you'd like to comment while you're here.
I would just offer that speed bumps can be very troublesome to the people who live next to them. They can also be a pain in the wintertime when you're trying to plow and maintain roads. Fire department gets a little concerned about the one on Columbia, because if they're racing somewhere and they have to stop it, go down to 5 miles an hour to get over that thing to get to it, slows them down a little bit. But from public works perspective, the big issue is, snow plows and that kind of thing. And the DelDOT hit the one on Columbia last year and took a corner of it up. So that's just another thing to avoid while you're driving. Yeah.
I think we kind of talked about the noise aspect at one point, because there was a rumble strip comment about approaching the circle and all the noise that's associated with the rumble strips, and the same thing with speed bumps and humps. Kind of ties in environmentally, noise pollution.
But make a point on that, so that in the part where in the recommendations, it said the study would include a comprehensive analysis of items such as, well, right now we're using speed bumps, so don't we need to look at them to see if they need to be either taken away or added or don't needed? So when they're doing the study, shouldn't they look at everything that we're using, silent policemen?
Yeah, I would think
speed-
so.
Doesn't
And
mean
we're
they're going
always,
to add more, just means they got to look at it to say, hey, you shouldn't use those, or we can do it another way.
yeah,
I mean, that's my thought.
I will add
agree.
that.
Yeah, members of the public, please come on up. If you could come up, and Ann's going to turn that microphone on. If you could just state your name and relationship to the city, if you're a resident or.
Yeah,
et
my
cetera.
name's Ron Bolden. I live at the corner of Hickman and King Charles. And, I'll talk a little bit later on some of that as far as what the issues are, but it's a similar issue that most everyone has. Lived there for about 10 years, lived in kind of Rehoboth for another 10, so say 20 years. The issue that I kind of, and that was going to be one of my recommendations. I don't want to get into that right now, but speed bumps, they don't necessarily have to be permanent. It can be at a certain point in time, you can put them down. And I guess this gentleman's name's Ken. So, during the summer, during the high traffic time, you can put them down. They're kind of bolted down, and they look fine. You can go, there's some examples of it, like just in Dewey. But you can put them down, bolt them down, unbolt them, and, for seasonal kind of thing, when the traffic is, an issue. So that's
to know.
kind of all I really wanted to state versus just blowing them off and just say, no speed bumps. I kind of get it. I agree with the fact of plowing and how it can tear up equipment, but obviously in the summertime, you're not going to have plows around. Emergency equipment, another issue, but that could be talked about and, discussed at another time too. So,
All right, thank you, John. Yeah, I agree. We've got them in town. They should,
just leave it on, okay.
we should evaluate everything we already have in town, and we're always going to have to keep in mind that, whoever's conducting the traffic study is going to have a different perspective than our public works director is going to have, that our residents are going to have, and what our, police department are going to have. So I think we need to keep that in mind with everything that we're looking at, and having them analyze. Any other comments on this overall background and recommendation?
I think it's well done and very comprehensive, so
Very good.
I think it touched on everything.
Well, then, I
Most
would,
things, with the,
I would entertain a motion to, that we adopt this and make the recommendation to the mayor and commissioners with the addition of handicap access and the analysis of speed bumps, humps in the appropriate section.
And we wouldn't have to vote on it again, right? We can just push it forward now after she makes the arrangements? Okay.
Yep.
So
So
move.
moved.
Okay. Second?
second,
We've got a motion by Elise Moore and a second by Donna Mayberry to adopt this comprehensive traffic safety parking study that will include what's in print, as well as adding handicap access and speed bumps, humps under the analysis section. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. So this will go before the mayor and commissioners in writing, probably the January workshop meeting, which is timely because that is about when we're having our first budget meeting. And essentially, this is recommending that we have that study done in the next fiscal budget year. New business, I'm going to, because we've got a guest here for a specific topic, I am going to move to new business C, which is discuss citizen voice concern relating to the safety and visibility of diagonal parking on sections of King Charles, including but not limited to the intersection of Hickman Street. We received an email from John Cantzes. Is that Cantzes? Is that the correct pronunciation of your last name?
He's Ron Bolden.
Ron Bolden.
Ron, I'm sorry. So we received two different citizen.
John is not here.
Ron, thank you for being here. We've got some pictures that illustrate the area, so I'm going to pull those up. And David, do you want to kick us off with a little background?
Yeah, sure. So Ron contacted Kevin Williams a little while ago, a couple months ago, and then about the intersection of King Charles and Hickman, where he thought the street crossing was dangerous because of the perpendicular parking right there at that corner on King Charles and Hickman. So I went down and talked to Ron. I asked him to send me an email. He put it in writing exactly what he thought the issues were. He's seen people almost get run over because they have to walk out far in the street before, if cars are parked perpendicular to King Charles, they can't be seen as they cross King Charles Avenue. And so he expressed concern about that. So I asked him also to just take a few pictures and maybe just a little sketch, and that's what he's done. He sent that to me last night, and I forwarded that to Ed, and he was just going to talk about that and just show your opinion of the situation there with that intersection.
So John, if you want to come up and to the microphone again and just talk about your experience and what your recommendations are, and I'll have your pictures here. I can scroll through them as you want me to. Ron, again, my apologies. We also
You got a John and a piece of paper, I'm good.
we also received, just for the record, an email from John, who was recommending a crosswalk be placed at the intersection of
Talking about a different intersection. The letter is regarding Rodney.
Rodney.
Yeah. So
And
we're
this is
talking about-
Hickman, sorry.
So we're talking about crosswalks at Hickman and
Really, I've really
Rodney.
got myself confused here this morning. Okay, go ahead, Ron.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. What I've done here is I've got too many pictures up here, but I wasn't sure kind of how to approach some of it. As you can see, and I'm sure it's because of the church, St. Edmund's is diagonally across the street from where we are. We're at the corner of Hickman and King Charles there. So what we've seen, and it was well known, I understand where we are, that's our house right there. So when you're at that intersection, and it's more of a seasonal thing. You can go down there right now, not such a big deal, you can see, because there's very few cars parked on any one of the streets. Summertime comes, the traffic, as we all are aware of, really increases quite a bit. And when you're going down, from that street, when those cars are headed in, and I'm sure it's a St. Edmund's thing. I'm a member of St. Edmund's as well, my wife and I. So we kind of knew what that deal was there, but now we're living there. I live there year round. And when I see in the summertime, especially over the last 2 years, since we've been down there living all the time, there is a situation there that I've seen many close calls. I've seen many, confrontations. I've seen many kids come out there and moms and dads screaming and yelling to try to stop their kids going across the street. Another issue in itself, but it's still one of those things. There's, a few ladies. I usually, when I know they're coming, I'll go out there and help them cross the street. That's how dangerous that is coming down there. Because when you leave, we'll say it's Laurel. If you leave Laurel and you're heading towards Silver Lake, it's kind of all out. There's a lot of cars that just roll down there. I get all the masses. I understand that. I'm not complaining about that because we're part of that. But through the course of a summertime, a seasonal thing, when you see the cars that are coming down there, there's nobody doing 25 miles an hour. We can get that straight right off the get-go. I know that's another issue in itself, but the people that are coming to visit Rehoboth, I know that's the ideal spot because, you're either at the church or you're close to the boardwalk. So that's an ideal spot, but when you're headed in, all those parking spots where you're headed in, that closes off King Charles at that point. It kind of, okay, now it goes out from the curb to the end of the parking. It's 18 feet. You got 12 feet from that end of that parking to the center line is 12 feet. So we can't really get to the point of where we even have like a bicycle lane like we're trying to accomplish there. And I know it's tough to squeeze a lot of that in, but there's a real issue that I have. Now, my recommendations get back to what Ken and I, everybody may agree or disagree on some things, but I kind of walked through it even after I put this together. I kind of drove through at least, our particular side of Rehoboth Avenue, south towards Silver Lake. Silver Lake has Lake Drive. It's got permanent speed bumps, okay, on Lake Drive. So I went down and started to go through, and if you go to Cullen, is where I know there's speed bumps. I got pictures of that, which you don't have there. I just happened to see that this morning. But there's speed bumps that they're bolted in. You can unbolt them. And I'm specifically talking for basically, a seasonal thing. Right now, everybody, trash trucks, you name it, contractors, whatever, they're rolling down that street. There's nothing, and I know we just don't have the police staffing that we can kind of monitor that. We do monitor a few of the streets, stop signs and speed and, all that kind of stuff. But when you get down to that point of where that road, people leave, they're coming from, we'll say Laurel, down to Silver Lake, it's whatever speed they want to take. And I don't care if you got that silent police, which we have tried, and that seems to be sometimes where at least it gets the acknowledgement of the people. But for it to actually slow people down, that's not happening. We can go by there, in the evenings, you can go by there during the day. There's people motoring through there very quickly, much more than 25. I'd say it's closer to 45 or 50. Not everyone. I don't want to make that a point of where it's, a direct highway, but it certainly is an issue. And for people to actually get kids across there or disabled people that are in wheelchairs, you're not going to get across that street without a car coming down there quickly enough to where, okay, they see them, but, and we've got that issue in other places. I know it's an issue we have throughout Rehoboth, and that's the study that I'm sure will come up with something there, but that particular intersection is really unsafe in the summertime. Right now, not so much, and it's due to the heading in, because you gotta, and people have got, if you're coming off of Hickman in either direction, you gotta nose your way out there. You gotta get way out in the middle before you actually see it, and you don't see anything, and they don't see you until you nose your way out there. So you got a whole car's length away from that stop sign to get out there for anybody to see, and when you do that, then people are also in that same condition that they walk out there beyond that parking, that headed in parking, and they don't see until they're way out there, and they almost just start to walk across the street, and everybody kind of comes to a halt. So I'm saying a quick little recommendation that I have, without kind of uprooting everything, wouldn't make a lot of sense for St. Edmunds to have parallel parking. That would be crazy, for Mass and everything, to people have to parallel park, and, I have issues with parallel parking myself, so it gets down to how do we best do it? Well, that's an alternative for that one block, because that's the only block that has that head-in parking. You go south from there, it's all parallel parking. So that one block, and it's due to church, I'm sure, the church is, so I'm sure that's the issue there. And that's, that is what it is. And I can't, we're not going to dispute that here, but for that one block, maybe we get those portable speed bumps and you put them down, and just like we do many other things. It's, can't turn left in on Rehoboth Avenue, during the, seasonal thing. But, during the off-season, you can make a left-hand turn. So it's unbolting them, putting them up, putting them away. And I went online, you can get them, a couple $100, you can get those. Same thing, pretty obvious. They've got built-in yellow strips on them that are very obvious, and they look halfway decent. So, without belaboring a lot of the things, I don't know if there were any questions, anybody had any other, but that one from Hickman to Laurel and down to, we'll say, Newcastle. And Dave, I'm sure he's tried to do some things, and I appreciate what he came up, and we took a quick look at it, but I really appreciate him even, stepping up here and everybody's time to listen to me with my complaint here. So, but I appreciate it. Anything else you need, Ed?
No, I think if anyone has questions.
One of the, there was an additional, Kevin, there was additional spot that's the diagonal parking that was taken away. So from Hickman, right on his corner, there was an extra spot, and I guess we blacked out one of those, so we moved it one back.
Yeah. That's a picture. Well, it is, that's exactly what it is, because
Oh, we just did it this year on the Newcastle one because you can't have a parking spot within so many feet of, a stop sign.
Right.
So I'm imagining, I'm assuming that's what happened on the Hickman block as well, or Hickman intersection. When they put that crosswalk in, they had to remove one of those
Right,
parking spots.
exactly.
Well, that was done 2 years ago, and it was, Evan Miller came down, and we looked at that as our house was being built, which is, you can see that vacant lot that's across that diagonal corner there, and we came across, and it was for obstruction of what trees and things you could plant, so there shouldn't be any obstruction. But I said to Evan, I said, well, if you come down here, this is the head-in parking, that it seemed to be a compromise at that moment to say, okay, let's eliminate that one spot. And they blacked out that one at the very corner. Now, I'm sure it was.
What happened to the sleeping policeman that was there? There was one there.
There's one down. There's one down on the Newcastle.
Yeah.
Oh, but there isn't
You
one
go
there?
down
No,
one block.
there's not one there,
Oh.
one at Hickman.
I walk that a lot because that's the beach that I walk down to.
Sure.
And I found that the people who are driving on that street in the summertime are very slow. They take their time. Now, I haven't seen what you saw, obviously.
I'm there
They take their
24/7.
time and they wave you across and,
I'm there 24/7.
Yeah.
You got to believe.
so
what
you
I'm
see
telling
it
you. I've
other
seen
times.
I see
And it may
every day.
just be the people going to the beach that they stop for. It may not be other people. I don't know.
Yeah, and as the day progresses, and I'm not saying that's 100%. You do get people coming up, and they do recognize that because sometimes there's people that step out, and they see the cars coming up there are going slow enough, one, that they see them, and they'll do the right thing. They let the pedestrians go first. But I'll dispute that what you say as far as everybody does. No, it's not that. The real deal is there's people that have come. Well, like I said, if I see a couple ladies that I know that I don't even know them by first name. If I see them on Hickman coming that way, they have no clue of what it takes them to get across from a kind of rolling walker kind of thing. Go get out there. Cars are coming down there much quicker than 25 miles an hour. So, and that's not an everyday thing, but for the most part, a highly traveled, both pedestrians because of the church, because of where it's located at, a lot of foot traffic, a lot of traffic. They're in, within those blocks, and it is an issue, or I wouldn't be here.
And where we installed the silent policeman on Newcastle and King Charles, the parking is parallel right there, so you can walk out where you don't have the perpendicular parking right there.
Direction from
It gives you more
south.
room. You can see
South,
better.
It's parallel. North, it's head in. So you got two different, same street, but because of the church being there and they need the adequate parking for those people coming to church during those masses, that's kind of where we are.
So there's also a factor there of revenue generation during non-church hours with those perpendicular spaces. Because I can remember a conversation that I had with someone who's in the room several years ago about how there was a whole floor of a parking garage on those blocks approaching the lake, where if the parallel spaces were taken out and turned perpendicular, there could be even more parking for the cost of the paint as opposed to the $10 million garage we were talking about back in the past. We've also talked about this street over the years, and several years ago, we asked for more crosswalks to make it safer. We have abundant crosswalks on First Street on the other side, the north side of Rehoboth Avenue. But as we head south and we get onto King Charles, there are very few crosswalks. And what we learned from Kevin is that because of the distance from curb to curb, there would have to be a landing pad in the median in order to put striped crosswalks there to meet ADA requirements. Because we're concerned about people that are in wheelchairs and or visually impaired. So we couldn't get the crosswalks that we asked for without the expense of landing pads at every intersection. And that led to conversations about streetscape on King Charles and perhaps putting a median in and planting trees, and then going to parallel parking through the entire length of the street, and then putting bike lanes in on both sides of the street. We went way into it. But to me, the speed hump is the heavy rubber one like we have on Columbia, correct?
I'm not familiar with.
And I
one.
believe we just have one of those in the city. We have one. So I would defer to that experience relative to doing it on King Charles. Keith is not here, but I would imagine he's done speed measuring on King Charles. That's been a topic in the past. And one of the things we learned from Chief Banks is that we're not really good judges of cars' speeds, and that what we think is fast turns out to be 30 or 35. So he presents us with a plot of how fast the cars were actually going in a particular section, and it's rare that we ever got one that was even in the 40s. It's kind of interesting because we're standing there and they're going by really fast. But to me, the safety of that area is still something that needs to be addressed one way or the other, whether it's with crosswalks, with landing pads, whether it's silent policemen at every intersection, whether it's upgrading the crosswalks to strobe lights like we have now on Rehoboth Avenue. There's always room for improvement, because there's no question in our conversations, and I've had other conversations with Chief Banks, people are driving faster. People have become less considerate. The COVID journey has taken us in bad places and bad directions. And one of those is excessive speed, and another is less consideration, like stopping at crosswalks. So,
And distractions.
yeah,
Distractions
and his issue is staffing and the decline in interest in being a policeman, which is very sad. And that came back this past year. It came back, and they were able to get more recruits. But just to set up radar and give tickets is 2 policemen taken from something else. And I also learned that we can't do photo radar because it's against the law in the state of Delaware. So we can't even approach a company to come in here and put in cameras and send people tickets and share the revenue.
Well, I live on Hickman, and so I cross that intersection usually twice a day during the summer. But I'm on bike, and I'm biking, and I have my bike chairs, or my beach chairs, and all my gear loaded on my bike too. So it is dicey going through that intersection, just as you described it, and primarily it's because you can't see. You can't see, and you have to pull so far out in order to see it. Now, but I'm like John, the times I've done it, this John, is that often people see you, they'll slow down, especially if they're coming the other way and they see you, they're waiting, they will slow down. And I don't think they've had a chance to get up a whole lot of speed from Laurel to Hickman. I think the worst speed is further down King Charles. But I think that intersection does need some help and to be addressed. And I thought the request was for a silent policeman. And my first reaction to that was like, well, where would we locate it? Because I think when I'm going through that intersection, I'm already aware of so many things, and a silent policeman would just be another distraction maybe, or another thing to watch out for. So I think the placement of it, but the other suggestion that we might do would be take out some of those diagonal parking spaces back from the intersection. Remove maybe 2 or 3 parking spaces on each side going toward Rehoboth Avenue so that the visibility is better there. And And I guess another thing that crossed my mind could be in that area where there's the diagonal parking. You know, maybe we reserve that for compact cars and that they're not the big cars and the trucks. I mean, that's what,
People will certainly agree with that. They'll pay attention every time.
well, if there were smaller cars parked there,
Yeah,
that would
that's-
help. That
That
would
would
help
be
a
really
lot.
nice.
But I think, I don't know about the speed bump. I could see maybe taking some interim steps, like,
Well, perhaps we should come up with a list a lot like Elise and Dave did here for that street. Like, the path of least resistance to me right now is silent policemen. And then have a structure like here on this outline, silent policemen, please. And then could we look into having speed humps? Because that's not a decision we can make. We have to pass that upstream. But I think silent policemen would be, to me, step number one, because we know what it's going to take to get striped crosswalks, and that's expensive. Silent policemen, I know from our experience on State Road, where Hickman crosses over to Canal, that they have really worked. And we're now, when we walk out there, half the time people are stopping, and there is no crosswalk. So it takes a little time to get adjusted to, but to me, that would be step number one. Then, okay, we can look at speed humps, seasonal, because they do bolt down. The one on Columbia, as I recall, is bolted down. And then what else would be appropriate to do on that street?
yeah, that sounds good. The other thing I think that's developing and will help is that here we've got a request for a third silent policeman on Rodney. So I'm envisioning, okay, so if one goes in at Hickman, we'll have one at Newcastle, we'd have three right there from the church down to Silver Lake. And it reminds me of the area. Yeah, okay, the Brooklyn, so that'd be four. And it reminds me of the area at North Shores where they have multiple silent policemen. And I think that slows the traffic speed down overall because you just see those and you just approach all those silent policemen more cautiously.
What's interesting about the silent policeman, and maybe Dave, you can back me up, or if you know this, but I want to say on Newcastle, where one was actually installed, because of where we actually hit into it, that people can't see backing up, and they hit that policeman. So that's another, I mean, because
To
of
be
that
backing
hit
into it there, right there.
backing into, you got, SUVs, you got, that's the thing, everybody's got SUVs. And the fact of, we're kind of talking like everybody, that comes to Rehoboth kind of understands, okay, silent policemen, they kind of got that way. And we do here, we say it, we kind of get used to it. We said we've got three, we maybe are going to get four, we have four. But when it gets down to it, it's new to us. So people coming in from everywhere else, are they kind of in tune with a silent policeman to kind of get? That's just one of those, another thing that we're making an assumption here because everybody is up to with, traffic rules, traffic regulations, pedestrians first, all that kind of stuff. But majority of what comes in the summertime, and I know it's part of the deal. I'm not disputing that. I didn't have to move here. I got that. I've heard it all. To say, oh, well, Ron, okay, I got it. You don't have to tell me. I'm just talking about a safety situation that we need to kind of look at and address. That's all, regardless of who's living there. But, now when you see it, I'm not going to stand by and just not say anything, well, it's a close call, another close call. I get that. But, when it gets into, it presents another problem, and maybe it's the cheaper alternative at this point, or maybe it's the first step that we have to take, in Rehoboth because of the expense, and, money's not growing on trees. I got that. But when you get down to, I see the issues with people just backing up, ran right into it, didn't even see it.
Then maybe, put that a silent policeman on the other, on on the other side of the intersection where, toward Newcastle, where there's no diagonal parking, where it's parallel parking, so people wouldn't back into the silent policeman. Just make it a little bit south.
Aren't they hinged? Don't they bend? Depending on which one you acquire from which provider?
They do to a degree,
Right.
but they break very easily too, yeah, so, yeah. They do bend a little bit.
So my question on this, I mean, we could probably talk about this ad nauseum continue on all day. But so we have this proposal here that we're going to submit to the commissioners in January. So because this is part of the thing where they didn't want us to piecemeal everything. So that's why we put this plan together. Do we see if it's adopted by the commissioners and they move forward before we make a decision on something to do here now? And if the professional is going to look at it, or do we just say, let's try something else? So I mean, that's your question.
I would lean toward we go ahead on something small like this and make the recommendation and try to move forward before a study that might take a year or two.
Yeah.
I
Just
mean,
like we
it's
had a
cheap.
list.
It's, why wouldn't, it's inexpensive. Why wouldn't we? Well, why wait? We've got a problem. Let's take some interim steps.
We made a list for Munson, let's just make a list for King Charles. Same way. Same approach. It's moving at lightning speed on Munson, lightning speed. So that's a good sign.
Right, right.
But I think we just take the same approach, A, B, C, D, E, King Charles, and pass it upstream.
You know, a few years ago, we had a study by Delaware Greenways, and on King Charles, they recommended putting a bike lane right in the middle of the street. They said it was wide enough that we could do that, and that would be a good place for a bike lane. I never could quite see that, but that's what they recommended.
Yeah.
Not all of King Charles, but some of it. You know, you
Now
can
they've
see,
thought all of King Charles.
well, I'm just saying,
That
up
would
to
be wild.
Newcastle, you know, you got all
Or
parallel
it
parking.
bends.
So now you move from Newcastle to the rest, up to Laurel, you've got head-in parking. So I could see somebody saying that, you know, maybe not taking everything into consideration. Because you certainly wouldn't want to do that on that one particular, two particular blocks, you know.
I'm on the fence of what interim steps could be taken, but certainly would look forward to recommendations by an expert. I just see a lot of challenges with King Charles and a lot of complexities. I mean, we've had public discussions that have gone from one extreme to another with, let's put more in diagonal parking and head-in parking, and let's go completely to parallel to, let's put a median in the street.
Well, I think some of that driver is too, it's a revenue, it's a balance between revenue and also the kind of need for, we'll say, the churches, you know, because you're going to have, you know, a high rate of people coming to those masses during, you know, every Sunday, and then, of course, every day you got an 8:30 mass. So, you know, it's a continuous thing, but more so, we'll say on Sunday, or we'll just say the weekend.
Edward's on the fence. Why don't we think about it and talk about it at the next meeting and then make a decision then?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, you know, we don't have Chief Banks here today. I certainly want to hear from him and get his input from him.
I mean, I'll put a document together just like we did here for King Charles if we want, and we can talk about it next month if you want to do that. And we don't have to go with it, but we at least have something to look at if we want to.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you,
for
Ron,
bringing
for
it
being
to
here.
us.
Any other comments on this topic?
Saw that.
Okay, then I'm gonna go back to new business A, which is discuss bicycle and pedestrian safety concerns related to cell phone usage, hands-free equipment, and other distractions that may cause hazards. Little bit of background, we were generally talking about pedestrian safety, where the topic of hands-free devices that I guess some have seen put on bicycles to help keep their hands on the handles and not limit distraction as they're on bikes. So we didn't have it on the agenda, so, and some of us wanted further discussion, so I've got that here. Anyone want to take it away?
Yeah, I got some interesting information just an hour or so ago. I called Frank, who owns Sea Green Bicycles. He owns like 6 shops throughout town, Atlantic Cycle. And he bought out Bob's and that. So I brought up this issue and I ran it by him and got some more information. And I think in our last meeting, someone had said that the current state law that says that car drivers can't hold phones in their hands, they have to use their phones hands-free, that law applies to other vehicles. And so Frank said he needs to look at it, but he thinks it does. He thinks it applies to motorcycles and probably to bikes too. So that state law may already be, in effect for bikes. And he certainly agreed it wasn't a good idea for bicyclists to be holding their phones and looking at their phones when they're biking. He said he provides phone racks for a lot of his rentals as it is, that he mounts it on the handlebars. So those things exist, and he plans to put them on all the adult bikes, all his rentals next season. And also he sells those kind of racks in his shop. They're $10 a piece or 2 for $15. And he says the thing he's run into is that a lot of people steal the racks or they get broken or something like that. He loses some money on that. I said, well, the police don't like to have to enforce this kind of stuff, or that's always an issue or that kind of. He surprised me. He said, well, he would support an ordinance. If there were an ordinance requiring some kind of bike rack or phone rack on bikes, he would be supportive of that. Or if not, I shouldn't say putting racks, but the fact that bicyclists should be using their phones hands-free when they're on bikes. That would be an appropriate way to go. But so those kind of racks do exist. They're available in town. And I think it's very positive that the main bicycle rental shop is planning on using them next year, because I think it shows a model to other people. Like those racks exist, we could start encouraging more people to use that and not hold their phones in their hands.
Thank you for getting that information, Donna. So it sounds like we don't have to do anything, and 90% of the bike rentals are going to have these hands-free racks on the bikes this coming season. So I guess the question is it still something we want to pursue with the other 1 or 2 rentals in towns? Do we want to require it for even non-rental bicycles?
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to, obviously there's an enforcement factor here.
I'd say there's no helmet law except for children. So if there's no helmet law in the state for adults, I think to legislate something like this is taking it to an extreme. It's just going way far out there. Generally, the cyclists that use those racks are using them for GPS data to map their rides, to track their heart rate, and more the confident cyclists are using them for real information. But as a safety device, we already know that, at least I'll say I know, every time I'm in front of a map in one of the parks or one of the map signs, people don't even know where they are. So the art of reading a map is dying. It is going away really fast. And I use the example with people where I was in a in a foreign country, and the taxi driver, I told him where we wanted to go. I told him what street, how to turn, and he still had to get his phone out and put it in the GPS in order to get there, because I showed him the map. He didn't never looked at a map before. So something like this is extreme to me. If we say people have to we're in a state where you don't have to wear a helmet on a motorcycle, it's just too far out there.
But we may already have a law, Dave. The state law about, hands-free driving, it may already apply to bicyclists.
There's a hands-free law, there's a seatbelt law, and again, when it comes to enforcement, the past 2.5, 3 years have created a tremendous shortage in the ability of law enforcement to enforce the laws. So every time I step out to cross Rehoboth Avenue, as an example, with the strobes flashing, I'm waiting to see a phone in someone's hand and have them blow through the crosswalk. So people are using their phones, they're in their hands. The same will be true with a cyclist, the same will be true with a biker on a motorcycle. They're all going to do it, but who's going to enforce that and write that person a ticket?
Well, and Dave, maybe what we do is look and check the state law, and this may be another bit of information to include on our bicycle brochure that we hand out. I don't know that this was addressed on that brochure, but
No, it wasn't.
so maybe if the state law includes bicycles, that we could include that bit of information. Like I'm not into like enforcing anything right now, but I think we could take a step toward informing people. Setting an esprit to make just like most bicyclists, they agree, you should wear a helmet. And most people have embraced that, So if we just inform people and encourage it, we might get people to embrace not using, letting them know, hey, there are racks for your phone to add to your bike. You don't have to carry it in your hand. So
maybe we put a QR code on the map that we hand out that goes to a site where you can buy one.
hey, maybe that could be, right, or just letting them know it's against, if the law applies to it already, we could inform them of that.
Well, I embraced that a long time ago.
What's that?
These racks to put your phone on.
Oh,
And I found it to be a distraction, that I need to look where I'm going, particularly when I'm going fast. I don't need to be looking at my phone. So I got rid of it. I just stopped using
Do
it.
you use your phone at all while you're biking?
It's in my pocket.
And so you don't use it while you're biking?
I turn on Strava, that's it. I turn on Strava when I leave, and I turn off Strava when I get back. And then if it's a phone call, unless it's a distinctive ringing person, I don't answer the call. I just keep going and wait till I stop. But I'm one person. It's not, I can't use myself as an example.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with informing people with
Let
bike
them know
rentals,
about it.
right? There's nothing wrong with that, but to mandate somebody has, in my personal opinion, to mandate you have to have this rack on your bike or a rental bike is way too far out.
Yeah.
I don't ride with when I ride a lot. My phone is in my little pouch. I don't answer the phone. If I have to make a phone call, I stop. I mean, at a certain point, we can't tell people to,
And I think we wouldn't mandate
too
a
far.
rack. I think
Right.
we'd have to say it has to be hands-free driving. It has to be hands-free bicycling. Put the onus on the bike, the cyclist, not on the shop owners.
right. But we should look to see if that law exists already right now before we do
If
anything.
it applies, if it
Right.
applies to them. And like Frank thinks it probably does.
Probably does. Yeah.
And,
It sounds like we're all in agreement that we're fine informing people with the brochure, but not willing to go much.
Let them know about available technology that might help them.
And one other thing Frank said, like if you insisted that the rental shops provide the racks, he said, I have to find a rack. I've got to have racks that fit every phone. And he said the ones he has are like silicone, I think, in that they're flexible so they fit the majority of phones. But that puts more of an onus on the shop owner. And here we have the primary bike outlets already moving to provide those racks. So I don't, I think that, you know, at informational points where we are.
Moving right along.
Yeah, sounds like we're all on the same page with informing individuals on what the law is and what technologies exist.
So I'm sorry, so for the notes, how are we going to inform the people? What, are we going to put it in the brochure? Are we going to put the onus on the shop owners so I can record this correctly? What are we saying? How we're going to inform?
I think I will ask a direct question to the chief if the law applies. If it does, I'm going to suggest that to the city manager that they put a statement to that effect in next year's brochure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're all
Good.
on the same page with that? Okay.
Yes.
This past spring, we, with the help of Kevin and our Public Works team, installed, I think, over 200 sharrows at some effort and expense. And we were asked to evaluate the success of that so we can determine whether those need to be refreshed each year, whether they're working or not. It's all very anecdotal, I guess. But I'd like us to at least have a conversation about those sharrows so we can provide feedback to Kevin Williams and his team.
I've had a lot of positive feedback. And the only stumbling block has been the word sharrow. What are those things in the street that I just saw? Those are sharrows. They're so you can ride safely. Oh, I really like them. So that's been a couple dozen comments that I've fielded. And of course, from the cycling community, people are really, really happy. That's outside just individuals. It's a step forward for the city to become more bicycle friendly and be safer, which are both really good things.
I've had people ask me what they are, and that's easy to explain. Not everyone knows what we're painting on the street.
I think part of it goes back to what I would call the gateway signage. Kevin and I talked about share the road signage on Silver Lake Bridge, for example, because it's kind of tight. So when we were researching the distance between the sharrows, the global dimension, and I thought maybe the share the road signage would be a benefit to help kind of reinforce what people are seeing on the pavement. That's the only suggestion I can make, because it took us years to get those, and I'm really happy that they're there.
Kevin, has your team, any of the city staff, or you personally received any feedback?
No one's really commented one way or the other to us. So the only thing I've noticed is because on Rehoboth Avenue, we put them in both lanes, that people have a tendency to feel they can stay in that left lane because it's got a sharrow in it. But they're only there to facilitate a left turn.
Right.
But they'll not, I don't know if they required them. They suggested they go in both so they know they can get over to make a turn if they need to. But that was the only negative thing I
It's helpful. Nobody's
observed.
honked at me for being in the left lane to make a left turn.
Yeah.
Other things have happened, but that's not.
Neither here nor there. Any other comments on the sharrows?
So I have a question to Kevin. Do you have to, do you think you'll have to repaint them every year?
Probably.
Yeah, that's what I was
We'll
afraid
probably
of.
do that, right. And I forget the exact amount, but it was several $1,000s to do all of them. We hired straight line contractor to come in and do those. They can do them very quickly. So, yeah.
Okay.
So they might make a second year, but
Right.
we'll look at them like in March and go, do we need to redo them or not?
Thanks.
Can I ask one question regarding the stencils on the sidewalk while you're up there?
Just stay up there.
So, no, it seems like,
I don't know if I know
it seems
that
like
answer.
they've been getting refreshed. The black stencil, walk your bike.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to ask
That's
Bill.
something that Bill would,
Maffei
yeah,
does.
yeah, so.
We do that in-house, so Bill
Right.
does those.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you. And Last on the agenda is just our committee meeting schedule for 2023. Does this date, the third Thursday, 2 o'clock, work for everyone? Okay, then we
It
will.
kills me, but I'm just one person.
but
When I
it's-
retire
it's
from
work-
racing, it won't be a problem.
Okay. Okay. So, future agenda items.
I'm sorry, what did you decide about D?
We're going to keep the third
Keep-
Thursdays at 2 o'clock. It seems to work for everyone.
Third? Is it the third?
Yeah, third Thursday.
I have good news. The race in August got moved up 1 week. I can be here in August.
Okay, great.
So before you go on, for the record, for the notes, what are we doing about 7B? Are we going to just continue to evaluate those sharrows? Do we want Kevin to paint them every year, or are we just going to drop this issue? Just for my notes.
I think I might leave it on the agenda for one more meeting. I would like to specifically ask Frank Cole to, he probably is the person that would get the most amount of feedback about them.
Okay.
And I'd also like to hear if the chief has any comments about it. So maybe we'll leave it on for one more meeting.
Should any of us, would you recommend, would you suggest that each one of us talk to 10 people and ask them what they mean to them? Do we want to get any feedback from the public, or is that beneficial at all?
Yeah, I would welcome that everyone talk to a few people.
Okay.
And if you want to get some feedback, that would be great.
Just to see what people think? I don't know.
Yeah.
If people have the time and they want to do it, that's what I'll do. Thanks.
All right, thank you. At the last meeting, Walter Brittingham talked about stepping pads that were placed on Rehoboth Avenue, and then I believe a couple mayors ago didn't like them and had them removed. Is that something that, and they're like the rigid pads that go right at the, before the crosswalks. I think it was DelDOT that installed them, I don't know, 10 years ago, and then they were removed. Is that something that we want to talk about further? No.
Walter's a great source of information, and he knows where all the skeletons are buried, but I don't remember that one.
Okay. Then we'll leave, if no one has a strong desire to talk about it, then I will leave it be. There were two other, I did speak to Walter this morning. He couldn't make the meeting, so he wanted to just throw a few things out there. I guess several years ago, DelDOT made a presentation recommending that on 1st and 2nd Streets on Rehoboth Avenue, where there be a few second delay on the green light versus the pedestrian green light, to give the pedestrians a few second head start into the crosswalks before traffic is allowed to go. He suggested that we have DelDOT come and do that presentation again.
Yeah, I'm not sure they presented it, but we tried to do that with them because it really is unsafe to have people turning while the light says walk,
Right.
And the other thing that people have come and told us, that backs up the traffic then.
Yep.
If you can't turn, then you're backing it up. So I would love to have us talk to DelDOT.
Okay.
I think that'd be great.
It's a cause and effect thing, but it would be good to talk to the professionals.
The other is Walter suggested that we make recommendations if we feel as though there's a lack of traffic enforcement or pedestrian safety enforcement, that we specifically recommend to the mayor and commissioners that we fund the ability for more enforcement. Is that something we want to talk about at the next meeting?
I think you got to talk to Keith Banks. Because it's been a challenge to get staffed, particularly seasonally. I think this summer was way better than last summer.
I mean, do we specifically know what's enforced and not enforced? I don't know. I don't know if that's our business.
Well, there's a philosophy within the city that I've learned about where we want to educate first and enforce second. So typically it's the repeat offender that gets enforced, but the first timer gets recommended. We've learned from Chief Banks over many years, we don't want to be known as a speed trap, unlike Greenwood and Ellendale and other towns in the state. We want to be friendly to people and welcoming to people, and it's been a point of mine to thank each one of the cadets every summer that I see, to thank them for being here, because they've suffered a tremendous amount of abuse, particularly over the COVID and masking and everything. So I think we have the educate philosophy still in play, but I would defer to Keith on that to be sure. But we're supposed to be a warm, welcoming, friendly place. This is my beach, my boardwalk. My Dolly sign got moved down the street, but it's still here. Those things are, people come here to have a good time, and signs of the happy place are still around. It's kind of changing, but I think enforcement is a manpower, person power issue first, and then it's a philosophy issue. How far do we go?
Well, I think in keeping with this, Dave, that Rehoboth does have this, educate before enforcing and being a friendly area. And I think we pick up on this with what's happening on the national conversation about this, that we're expecting police officers to do so much. Every time something comes up, it's the police do it. And I think we need, the whole idea of conceptualizing enforcement or safety or community safety in the broad sense, that it's to have other professions besides police. Maybe we have a courtesy patrol. Maybe we have something like that. They're not policemen, but there's some other more like social workers or something that help to spread information or to augment what the police do, to really take a big load off of the police. We could have, just like the parking patrol. Parking patrol takes that off the police, okay? Maybe there's some way to conceptualize another type of, just like beach patrol. But maybe we do that in other ways in town.
But that's a budgetary item again. There's a social work shortage too,
Right. Some of that could be volunteer work. There are jurisdictions that have volunteers that help people with wayfinding. I think it's the VIA that staffs the kiosk.
Yeah, they help Main Street with that on a
Right.
couple days a
And
week.
maybe there could be people associated with them that would be mobile that could.
Or the,
It sounds like, without going too much, creating a discussion now, it sounds like there's at least an appetite for some discussion around it.
Yes.
It may be,
do that.
I may ask Chief Banks to maybe, he usually does a recap each year or a monthly recap of, how many citations for various things. It may be interesting to look over the last 5 years, year over year, the difference in some of that. And
The trends.
If the trends. So I
We had
will
that
put on.
volunteer bicycle thing up on the boardwalk that he knows all about. He worked with them. That'd be interesting to see what he says about the volunteers helping out.
All right. Any other items for
Somewhere
future
along the line,
discussion?
we have to embrace our sidewalks because we are transportation, and so we should at least put on the agenda to start talking about how we want to do it.
Can you elaborate just a little bit, John? Elaborate just a little bit on what you mean by that?
Well, the committee a few years ago, what we did was we looked at every street. There are sidewalks that are, they're kind of crumbling, and there's sidewalks that are raised up a little bit, and they're not safe. But at that time, there was debate in city council as to whether sidewalks should be taken care of by the homeowner or by the city, since it's a resort. So we didn't get very far, but I think it's something we have to do because we do get a bad name when we have bad sidewalks. I mean, I've heard people complain on the radio.
It was, Chris Flood wrote an article about it in the Cape Gazette.
He did?
Yeah,
Just recently?
yeah. Within the past, Cape Gazette, Chris Flood wrote an article about the sidewalks
Oh, did they?
and the trees that the roots have grown and sidewalks are becoming uneven and we must have a grinder somewhere that smooths out all the separation between the slabs, which has got to get, I would imagine, be worse and worse every year. Because we also,
These are not, these are from ARP.
well,
I'll take a look.
we've got this tree-friendly mindset versus safety.
What you said?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just not hearing well, I'm sorry.
No, we should talk about it because it is a safety issue. And we're tree-friendly. We don't want to remove trees,
Right,
but at the same time, many of these trees have outgrown their useful life
right,
and need to be replaced.
you're right.
Wasn't there something on like a dozen years ago where a lot of the trees, I'm feeling like on South Rehoboth had to be removed and the sidewalks had to be replaced and people were upset about the trees? Am I wrong, or does anybody else remember that? Yeah.
I don't, but it's probably, it's happening all over the city.
I also just found out that we're making homeowners replace sidewalks, and now we're also charging them a fee to do it, which is something that's brand new, a permit fee.
Yeah, I replaced mine 3 times because they had about that much of a rise. But the city sent me a notice, so I did it.
So the sidewalk is in the city right away,
Yes,
and it's city property.
yes,
But the attached homeowner is responsible for the maintenance of the sidewalk.
yes.
Yes. I had to replace mine years ago.
Oh, the curb also. Isn't that special?
All right, I will.
Merry
add that-
Christmas. That's,
I will add that.
I'm always learning here. Every day's a school day.
It's a very interesting discussion, right? And we went through this kind of process on Norfolk. It was this year we paved Norfolk and Scarborough, and we were doing the water main in Norfolk. So we went through, went to every house, said, okay, that guy needs a new sidewalk, that guy needs, and all these things that maybe not but required. Like, so there's a lot of curbs. If you see them, they're just leaning over, right? So you can't really get up close. It impedes flow of the storm water, and you can't compact up next to it. And it looks like crap, right? And sidewalks that look like crap. So you send them a note, said, hey, your sidewalk could stand to be replaced. Why don't you do that while we're here? We'll do it. We'll just charge you for the effort it takes, in front of your house. And, out of probably 55 people we sent that to, we probably got half a dozen that did anything with curbs and or sidewalk.
Well, you know what they sent me was a list of all the contractors that the city works with.
Yeah. So now, I go through it. We replaced the water main. We put several new laterals in. We put curb where we have to put curb in, and now you have a very disrupted look, right? Because you got brand new curb, nice new asphalt, crappy curb, and brand new curb going down. So you don't get that nice clean look that everything got done all at one time. Right. And I know there is some discussion about who really should be doing that work. Can we do it without, and just send them the bill? All those kind of things. But it bothers me that when we leave Norfolk this year, or we left Norfolk this year, and there is still some crappy looking stuff out there with respect. And it's lean in, maybe not totally in violation, and they probably wouldn't send them a citation from building and licensing, but something that if we wanted to kind of address it, hey, when you get done that street, you're doing all this work on it, why don't you make it look, everything look new on that? So that'd be an interesting discussion to see what are some options we could do on ownership or maintenance of curbs and sidewalks.
All right, I will add that to a future agenda. Any other comments from the public? Ron, anything from you? If you could just come up to the microphone. A lot of people watch the meeting and they can't hear what's happening.
Including me. Interesting what, even Ken says. I know the work they did on Norfolk, that looks great. But it was just it's one of those things, it was part of the deal of building a house, live on the corner. I got it, that's what we end up paying for the sidewalks on each side. So that was part of the deal of Okay, building a house. Well, 40 grand, that's, yeah, you tack that on there. I got it. You didn't have to move there, Ron. I hear that same old, and so, give me some credit here. But it's interesting to hear, as you said, and as everybody has said here, where trees, they're uprooting the sidewalks and, unsafe in more so in some certain areas than others. But you see the abuse through the course of the summertime. When I say the abuse, people trying to park, whether it's head-in parking, parallel parking, a lot of that damage is done to there. But because you live where you live, that's going to be part of the deal of you own that, it's a curb, it's a sidewalk. Just went through it. Apron on, the driveway that I have coming in here. It was a trash truck, came in, ran over that piece and, broke it. So he shouldn't have been driving into the driveway to back up into it. So went through that with the contractor and, it was one of those things, had to end up replacing it. But when you hear all the things that you hear, a lot of times it's not the homeowner, except the homeowner, he's or she is required to take care of that particular thing. It doesn't sit well at times, but again, it's part of the deal. So, but just that comment, that's all.
Thank you. Any
Yes,
other?
we do not want to increase taxes.
Any other final comments from the committee members?
I'm good.
All right, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 3:17. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Are we going to get a calendar?